All right. Oh, my legs hurt from sitting so much. I need to like get out and actually like walk around. But I've been sitting in my room filming all day, so here we are. Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. So a little while I did a video about having OCD and being a cosplayer, and I wanted to do a video about my full OCD story, not just how it relates to cosplay, but how it relates to my life in general, because I think that's a really important discussion to have. And it happens to be Mental Health Awareness Month in the US, so it seemed like a good time to finally make this video. So this video is just going to be me talking at the camera. There's not going to be a whole lot of visual stuff going on, so feel free to put this on in the background, grab a snack, do some photo editing, do some art, whatever, while you're watching this, or rather listening to this. And we're just going to jump into it. I'm just going to basically talk about my life having OCD, and that's it. It's going to be a very open video, if that makes sense. I'm going to be very open about my life and my struggles and all that good stuff, because I think it's really important to talk about mental illness and mental health, because you can really feel alone when you're struggling with mental illness. And it's really reassuring to know that you aren't alone, and that these symptoms don't just, well, that they are symptoms in general. That's really important to know, that you're not just experiencing things that are exclusive to you, that they are actually symptoms, that they are actually treatable. So, you know, you might watch this video and you might be like, oh, that kind of lines up with my own experiences. And then from there, you can do maybe more research on OCD, talk to a licensed professional, get a proper diagnosis, and begin your journey to recovery. Because for me, if I had known, like, I had textbook definition symptoms of OCD since I was a child. And if I had known the textbook symptoms of OCD, I could have gotten a diagnosis much earlier, and it would have changed my entire life, because I'm at a point in my life where I'm not happy with where I am because I've been held back by OCD, and I'll talk more about that later. But it's just like really important to know about mental illness and be able to maybe recognize symptoms, not so that you can self-diagnose, but rather so that you can then take all of that, go to a licensed professional, and get a proper diagnosis. Because you might have these things happening to you and you might think that it's just you, but it's not. And there's actually something that you can do about these things. So it's really important to know that you can actually do something about these things. I feel like I'm rambling a lot, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So, hello, I'm Anya, and I have OCD, which stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, which is an anxiety disorder, and it sucks. First thing we have to know about OCD is that it absolutely sucks a lot, and it's a very limiting disorder, and I don't think a lot of people know about that. And so I want to talk about what OCD is actually like, because I feel like a lot of people think it's you know, washing your hands a lot, being really organized, being really neat, being really like obsessive about being neat and clean, but it's really not. You can in fact be the exact opposite, and that can be a result of OCD. So we're going to be talking about all of that today. I first started having OCD symptoms when I was about 8 years old, so I was in grade 3 at school, and I had a very not great school career in terms of being bullied a lot and having really not very helpful teachers. They were very harsh about me being bullied. Like they always blamed it on me and being too quiet and like too sensitive. So it wasn't, I was experiencing bullying a lot, and I didn't have a lot of control over it. And one of the things that OCD kind of comes from is a lack of control. So I think I was probably in a point at which I just felt this lack of control for whatever reason, and that's what started these OCD symptoms. My two biggest fears when I was 8 years old was barfing and death. That sounds really funny when I actually say it out loud. So one thing that I developed when I was 8 years old and I was struggling with all this stuff was this thing called the tests. And the tests was a series of things that I would have to do in order to either not be sick or not die. So it would be like, if you walk down this hallway a certain way, you won't barf, or if you don't step on any cracks while you're walking down the sidewalk, you won't get hit by a car and die. It was stuff like that. And I also developed this thing called a thought friend, which was basically just me talking to myself. But it was like a little voice inside my head that I could talk to about these things, who would kind of help guide me through all of these tests that I had to do. That's very much textbook definition OCD. I would have to like walk a certain way. I'd have to do things in a certain way in order to not barf or not die. So that was kind of the first really big symptom of OCD that I had. I still have my thought friend to this day, which is, again, it's basically just me thinking things to myself, but I've kind of imagined this other like entity within my brain to kind of help me like through things. Probably not a healthy thing, but it's there. The next thing that I really remember in terms of my OCD was the notion of intrusive thoughts. And these are thoughts that you don't have any control over. And I can't remember exactly when I started having these, but they were very distressing when I first started having them. And they're still distressing today. Intrusive thoughts really suck. Intrusive thoughts are basically thoughts that you can't control, and they end up having you think like really scary things, really bad things. Like you could think bad things about people you care about. You could think bad things about really anything or anyone. Basically, the worst thing that you can imagine, your intrusive thoughts will take that and run with it. If you see things on the news or you hear about things that are like really, really bad, your mind will take those things and run with them and kind of like wish those things on other people, which is very, very scary. Intrusive thoughts are very broad, like you can think a lot of different things, but that's kind of just like the first thing that comes to mind when I think of intrusive thoughts is basically thinking bad things about other people that you don't mean to be thinking. So it's like there's a little demon in your brain who is basically speaking through you, but it's not actually you, and you can't control this other voice within your head. It's very scary, and it really sucks. The intrusive thoughts would be like that for a long time. I'd think things that I don't want to think, and I had no control over them. And then when I was in middle school, I watched a movie, and in this movie, the main character, she swears on the Bible and basically makes this contract, essentially what is like a contract. And if she breaks the contract, then she dies. And this was a terrible thing for me to encounter and basically get planted into my brain, because now my intrusive thoughts were taking the idea of a contract and running with them. So I was struggling with my brain thinking various things like, swearing not to do whatever, otherwise I'll die, basically, stuff like that, or some other terrible outcome that, like I said, when it comes to intrusive thoughts, like the worst thing you can think of, your brain's just going to take that and run with it. So that happened, and that was a huge thing, and that was a huge thing throughout my preteen years, my teenage years, was just having these unbreakable contracts that I kept like forming in my brain. And I talked about that in my previous video, so I won't go too far into it because you guys kind of know the gist of it, but that's kind of the next big OCD thing that happened. If I'm looking at my like major OCD timeline, that was like the next main thing that happened. The other thing that happens with OCD is it basically spawns, is that the right word? I don't know, but it spawns anxiety and depression. I mean, OCD is an anxiety disorder, right? So obviously anxiety is going to be a part of it. I have always had social anxiety ever since I was a kid and I was bullied. Basically what would happen is I'd be talking to like my classmates and they would ignore me, and I would find that embarrassing. So then I associated like talking to people with being embarrassed. So I stopped basically talking to people. So I was always very quiet in school. It was very difficult for me to like order food or like go to the cash register and like buy things and stuff like that. And I just had really bad social anxiety and communication anxiety, which is still something that I have today. If you've ever sent me an email to my business email, I either take a very long time to reply to it or I don't end up replying to it at all because I have this communication anxiety that keeps me from being able to like reply to things in a timely manner or even reply to things at all whatsoever. So if you have ever sent me an email to my business email or a DM somewhere, I apologize if I've never replied to it. It's because I have communication anxiety and that still affects me to this day. So like there's that. I've always struggled with anxiety, and that has been a huge part of me not progressing in life as much as I have wanted to. For example, I can't drive because I was always really scared of the fact that you would have to talk to a bunch of people in order to learn how to drive. I'm much better about this now that I've gotten treatment. But for example, my dad sent me to the driver's licensing place to get one of the driving guides, which are, the little like book that you study to get your driver's license. And what ended up happening was I ended up crying on the side of the sidewalk because I was too scared to go in and ask them for this booklet. Like, that's what we're working with. That's the level of like anxiety that I had been suffering with throughout my teenage years and into my early adult years. So it took me a long time to get my first job. I procrastinated a lot. It wasn't until my parents like really put their foot down, was like, you need to get a job, that I actually like really went for it. It was a very scary experience having to like deal with calling people back, right? Like having anxiety. I have a huge fear of the phone. Like whenever my phone rings, I go into a panic attack. And so getting my first job was very, very difficult, but I ended up doing it, which was a huge triumph. Throughout my childhood, my teenagehood, and my young adulthood, I went completely without any diagnosis. We knew that I had anxiety and we did things to try and help that, but anxiety is only like a subset of OCD, right? All the treatment that I was getting wasn't targeting OCD, so it didn't end up having any long-term effects for me, basically. So I pretty much went like untreated for most of my life, and that has had terrible consequences. Like I said, I can't drive because of my OCD. I went to school, but I was too scared to move away from my hometown, so I wasn't able to get an education that I really wanted. Not to say that like the education that I got wasn't good, but it wasn't good enough for me to be able to make a career out of it. And that was all because I had OCD and couldn't move somewhere else to go to a better school. So now I'm stuck in this weird limbo where I've gone to school, but I haven't been able to get like a proper job because the schooling that I got wasn't sufficient. I'm still working retail. Basically, OCD has really stunted me, and about 4 or 5 years ago, I finally was put in touch with a therapist who interviewed me and figured out that I had OCD, and he was like, okay, we're going to target your OCD instead of your anxiety. This is the issue, is that you've gotten this treatment before, but it was only targeting anxiety. It wasn't targeting OCD. And so now since we're going to target your OCD, like that's actually going to make a difference. And it really has. I started medication. I started therapy for my OCD, and it made a huge difference. And now I'm finally kind of moving forward in life, but it's taken me so flippin' long to do that, right? I look around and I see people who are much more accomplished for their ages because they didn't have this same illness stunting them, right? And I try to tell myself, it's not your fault, it's because you were sick, right? But it still sucks. It still sucks to see where I should be versus where I am, right? It's a whole thing. Basically what I'm getting at is that OCD is a very, very debilitating illness, which hopefully telling my story, which it feels very fragmented, me telling this story, so I hope it all makes sense. I hope it all kind of goes together. But like it's a very debilitating illness, and it really stunts you, and it's so much more than just like washing your hands a lot. Like people say, oh, it's just my OCD when they go to like make things neat or like straighten a picture on the wall. They're like, oh, it's my OCD. Which like I said in my previous video, like no hate to anyone who's ever said that, but I think saying things like that really stereotypes the illness and like really makes people think that that's all it is. It's just, you know, oh, you just like to straighten pictures on the wall. Oh, you just wash your hands a lot. And it's so much more. It's being held back. It's being controlled by your brain. It's thinking terrible things that you don't mean to think. It's crying because you don't want to go into the driver's licensing office to get a booklet, right? Like it's so much more, and it's so debilitating, and it sucks, right? It sucks. So anyway, I'm in a much better place now than I was previously, but I have a long way to go. I need to get my career off the ground. I need to, you know, get to a place where I feel satisfied with my accomplishments. And I'm not there yet, but I'm definitely further than I was before. Like I said in my previous video, I've broken a lot of the contracts that I've made in the past, which was a huge thing. You know, I've worn fake eyelashes, I've worn fake nails. These were all things that I had sworn off of before, that I've finally done, and I feel comfortable actually doing those things, and that's been incredibly liberating. My therapist has been amazing. He has just like, he has changed my life. There's still a lot more ways to go, but I've made tremendous strides, I think. Kind of not a positive way to end it, but not a negative way to end it, I guess. I apologize if this video was like really fragmented, but I hope that gives you like a bit of an illustration of what OCD is like and what my kind of own journey has been like. And I also just want to say that I think that like I said previously when I was talking about intrusive thoughts, is that it's like you have a little demon in your brain that you can't control. And who does that sound like? It sounds like Vanessa. I can't tell you how happy I was to like learn about Vanessa and her like the whole Vanny Vanessa dynamic, with like having this evil entity within you that you can't control, but it's like it's operating through you, but it's not actually you. I think that that's just like so reminiscent of having intrusive thoughts, and it was very comforting to see that in a character and have that kind of a character to relate to. This sounds like the dorkiest thing ever for me to be saying this, and it doesn't really fit into the video that well, but I wanted to mention it. More characters with mental illness, please. I joke that like I love Vanessa because she's a mentally ill queen and I'm also a mentally ill queen, but like it is so awesome to see a character who canonically has anxiety and has this entity within them that they can't control, and it just feels so much like having intrusive thoughts. You know, you have this little entity within your brain that you can't control, and it's just it's really comforting and really awesome and kind of empowering to be like, hey, that character is like me. So I wanted to mention that because I really like that. Vanessa canonically has anxiety and canonically takes medications for her anxiety and canonically goes to a therapist, and like those are all things that like I can relate to, so I really appreciate that. As dorky as that maybe sounds, but yeah. So anyway, that's my little video about, not a little video, that was probably a really long video. I've been recording this for like half an hour right now. But anyway, that's my little video on OCD and what OCD has been like for me. And I should have also mentioned that like obviously OCD is going to be different for different people. These are just my experiences having OCD. And maybe some of you watching also have OCD and you want to share your experiences, please by all means share them in the comments. I had a great response to my previous OCD video, and I just want to thank everyone for sharing their thoughts and their experiences and all of that. That was really awesome. There were a few people who said like, hey, this sounds a lot like what I'm struggling with. I'm gonna explore that more and see if maybe I can get a diagnosis, and I thought that that was really, really encouraging. So thank you all for sharing your mental health experiences. I really appreciate it. And I hope that this video taught you something new about OCD, maybe gave you some comfort if you also have OCD and you're looking to see other people with your same experiences. I really hope that this did that for you. Yeah, I guess that's it. I guess that's all I'm gonna say for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it was probably a really long one and there was a lot to unpack in it. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch it and process it and all that good stuff. If you want to check out my OCD and cosplay video, I'll have it linked up in the eye as well as in the description for you to check out if you haven't checked that out already. That also gives more insight into what OCD is like and what my struggles with OCD have been like. And yeah, that's basically it. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys all next time, but until then, Panda Faces, please be sure to take care. Bye.